Naofumi Iwatani was just a normal boy. Well, boy is definitely not what I would necessarily call him. He is an adult male, about 22 years old. And he would just be staying home with his parents, of course, giving him an allowance and having a good time reading and watching anime and reading some manga. And he would just be a normal lad, frankly, a normal person that just enjoyed his time. On top of this, he would be living right next to a giant farm where he actually would work from time to time, cutting down trees and actually helping the good old farmer that's there get ready for winter, summer, and so on and so forth. And he gets paid on a fraction of what basically is sold on the farm. It's a nice life for Naofumi. He might get an allowance, but he also gets a pretty penny from helping with the farm, so he also gets a decent amount of money. This allows him to just have a pretty decent and nice life, at least for the last couple years, and he decides that this next paycheck, he's gonna go take it to the library and check out some brand new manga. When he finds the library, of course, this brand new spanking library that looks amazing, he walks in to look around, looking more and more, finding some amazing manga, eventually finding an odd story. The story of a ton of cardinal heroes. Not really his cup of tea. He doesn't like the idea of being, a normal hero, cardinal hero. That sounds very religious based. Sounds kind of lame. But out of nowhere, he begins to flip the page to see this weird looking chainsaw. But then a man that looks ragdolled, destroyed, almost at the edge of death. What is that? Why would that be in this type of book? He continues to flip, and there's nothing else there. It's just clear pages, as if it was all transparent. Nothing at all. But just as he goes to put the book down, he hears a deafening silence in the room, and the book sucks him in. Immediately, he would end up in a brand new place, a place unknown to him, and he would look around to see 3 other people holding weapons. These would be a bow, a spear, and also a sword. He would be shocked to see this and looks around himself to see that he has a weird chainsaw. Now this is interesting. I mean, he's of course used the chainsaw before, but why does he have a chainsaw? He's not so sure, but of course he doesn't think too much about it, at least at the moment. But when the royal knights and many others come down to greet the 4 cardinal heroes and explanations are given about why they are there, well, caution is thrown to the wind, especially when they see that chainsaw. The chainsaw terrifies them, bringing him up to the king, and Naofumi, without even a second look, is thrown out, as if he's some sort of garbage. The knights even chase him as if they want him dead. Obviously Naofumi's not so sure what's going on, and he has no idea what this world even is. He continues out, taking his chainsaw, and he tries to throw it to the side, but as he does, it just appears back on his back. Obviously, Naofumi is taken back by this. It must be some sort of trick. Maybe he's sleeping. As he pinches himself, nothing occurs. He's not sleeping. What is going on? He realizes something though. This world is different, far different. Naofumi begins to think that this must be some sort of dream, some sort of joke, some sort of nightmare in a way. He begins to continue to walk around in this weird world, but he realizes pretty quickly this is no dream. This is life or death now. He realizes that he needs to survive. This isn't some normal, world he once loved and learned in. He's in a world that is unknown to him, and now he needs to somehow use his own willpower to survive. He begins to look at his chainsaw that he's currently carrying around, and one that he tried to throw away. And he begins to, do what he possibly could with that said chainsaw, and that's chop down some trees. In the wilderness nearby, he begins to cut down woods, and a decent amount in fact. He begins to kind of make a little bit of a shelter out of this wood, but he's so, well, inexperienced in general with this aspect, there's not much he can really do to, well, make a nice place for himself to live. But he continues to do this, and then also taking the leftover logs and putting them aside. But before he could even take a rest and sit down and take a break, he's actually swarmed and attacked by small creatures and animals. Luckily, being able to defend himself and fend them off, he's able to kill a couple of them using the chainsaw. And actually using the chainsaw, able to absorb the different materials that those animals have. Of course, Naofumi is pretty interested in the fact that his chainsaw just absorbed these creatures, but that's a whole nother, well, question for a whole nother day. He takes his time to get set up, make sure that he's safe underneath this house of his, which is barely even a house, and he heads to bed. He falls asleep, and in the next morning, early morning, he hears these guards that are around his house. It seems as if the guards are looking for him, so he gets up as quick as possible and leaves. He wonders why these knights/guards are even trying to hunt him down, especially because they were so quick to throw him out. Maybe they realize something. Maybe they know something Naofumi doesn't, but he's not so sure what's even going on. Nonetheless, though, he decides to take the logs when the guards or the knights leave and begins to head off to a new location, eventually finding a small village. This village is known as Loot. Of course, he's not actually able to he doesn't have any money, so he can't spend money to stay anywhere near there, but the people of Loot are actually extremely nice. They have heard rumors of what Naofumi is, and are giving him an opportunity to actually stay there as long as he can basically help them out with certain tasks. And of course, Naofumi can do what he can. He helps out as much as possible, and for the next couple of days, he does just that. The village likes him very much, and during the nights, Naofumi would try and go back into Melromark just to get some supplies that he would need in the future, but he wasn't really able to get that much. He doesn't know the place very well. He just knows that it's a place with hot commodities, so he knew that there would be some things that would definitely help him out. But after going there a couple times and leveling up out of pure just, well, cutting down trees and slaying animals, he would finally get past level 10. Level 10 giving him actually something kind of odd. It's a little pet. A pet that is kind of ingrained in his, well, leveling system and actually his HUD menu. The pet doesn't actually exist in, well, real life. It's kind of odd. He believes that it would have been kind of cool to drag the pet out into real life. Maybe he could actually help him work, but he doesn't even know how to do that at this moment, so it kind of just sits there. The pet is like this little small animal with a weird chainsaw at the top of its head. It's adorable but scary at the same time, believing that it must be some sort of like demonic dog creature that will saw his hands off, but that's something else for another time. But one night when he's passing through Melromark, he actually is stopped by this odd looking man. This man is actually a slave trader that begins to greet Naofumi within his, well, domain. As Naofumi walks in, he sees a ton of these enslaved creatures, in which Naofumi says that he doesn't want any part in this. But of course, the slave trader eggs him on, saying that he'll take whatever he has. He can actually even take this like some of these other animals. There's some that are super weak and really can't fend for themselves. And eventually Naofumi would come across a demi-human that is practically on death's door, in which he doesn't have money to pay for this demi-human at all, but he gives what he can, and obviously the slave trader says that it's squared away. It's not like the demi-human would mean much. It's basically a dead body at this point, that he'd be taking out the trash for him anyways. In which the slave trader allows Naofumi to take her away, and as he puts a slave crest on her. But obviously this would be complimentary, because Naofumi would be absolutely broke after this point. He would take her, but not understanding why she would need a slave crest anyways. But Naofumi would take her away to Lu village in hopes of getting her some sort of healing and actually getting her some medicine. Luckily, there's some people there that care a lot about Naofumi and actually enjoy his presence, but do question the whole slave crest antics. But he explains exactly what occurred, and he just wanted to get her out of there as soon as possible. And of course, the people of Lu village would understand that, and it would make a lot of sense. So they would try to get her any medicine, and it would allow her to feel just a little bit better, but she still would be going through a lot of the trauma and other things like that she's been going through. Luckily though, during one of Naofumi's trips, he does come across a bunch of herbs and different things that would definitely allow him to eventually allow Raphtalia, who is the demi-human that they got, basically to become healthy. And after about maybe a week or so, she would be just that, healthy. Naofumi would head over to her, and as she's just sitting there, just kind of terrified, he tells her that everything is okay, that everything is going to be okay. He's not too in depth in this world, but he promises to make sure that she won't go through whatever happened before, won't let it happen again. And of course, the people of Lu village say that they will help do the same, even against the waves. But as they say this, Naofumi's confused. What the heck is the waves? They're shocked to hear this. How does he not know about the waves? Of course he has to know about the waves. In which Naofumi would be, well, obviously they would explain to Naofumi what they are, in which he's in complete and utter shock. He begins to tell them that he's played video games with such events, at least not exactly the same, but very similar. That they need to start fortifying the village, and they need to start getting really prepared. Naofumi apologizes for basically slacking on that regard, but they say that they can't really do much about it. They just rely on the guards and hope that the heroes save them. In which Naofumi shakes his head, saying that he's supposed to be one of the heroes. But guess what? They kicked him out thinking that he was some sort of fake, not wanting someone like him around, that he's not sure what even occurred. But they ask him, what other weapons were the other people using? And when he announces that there's a sword, a spear, and a bow, but no shields, there's some mild, if not heavy concern wash over them. Is there no shield hero? How is it possible that another hero could be swapped out? They're not so sure, but that's just something they'll need to deal with, I guess, in the future if that concern comes up once again. Naofumi and Raphtalia would begin working around the village, and the villagers would help as well, helping him fortify various amounts of the buildings, and actually allowing him to level up on various creatures throughout the forest relatively easily. Naofumi, ironically enough, actually is super skilled at cutting wood, well, for one, because he has a chainsaw, but also he can actually fortify things extremely well. It's kind of weird. He feels that there's more power beyond his just chainsaw, that his chainsaw must have something within it, in depth, that he can make his strength excel massive amounts. He sees his skill tree within his HUD menu, and there's so much there, but there's so little he's actually doing. All of it involves, well, furniture, fortification, cutting down trees, skinning and basically cutting up animals. Stuff like that is involved in some stuff that he has. But this skill tree, there's hundreds, maybe even thousands beneath it, but he has none of it. He doesn't understand. He only has the basic amounts of damage and attack that the chainsaw has initially. But still, at least it's good enough for now. But Naofumi would begin to think that maybe there's some chances he'll need to take to get at least a little stronger. Naofumi and Raphtalia would head out, but Naofumi would tell Raphtalia that she should stay there. They don't have a weapon for her, and there's nothing he can really do about that at the moment. Naofumi then pats her on the head, apologizing, but as he does this, something appears out of his chainsaw. It's a small little animal? He's not so sure. This little animal is the same thing he saw in his HUD menu. How is this even possible? How was he even able to do this? It seems as if once he got a companion part of his party, which he didn't even know was a possible thing to do, it actually attaches to the companion instead of himself. He's not so sure if it can even attach to himself, but I guess it's a cool thing to think about that he's able to attach this pet, and maybe it will help protect Rautalia and allow Rautalia to, well, be stronger, I guess. He's not so sure, but Rautalia would just have it on her shoulder, and it would be just that alone. That's it. It would just sit on her shoulder and just be fine right there. He's not so sure how that works, but nonetheless, he'll go with it. Now Fumi would head off to a nearby cave, a cave that hopefully would allow him to fight a little bit stronger monsters, but find some ways of making some more cash. He does need to send some other people from Loot Village into Melromark to actually get some more cash and get some more money, and also maybe even going up the trail further to see if there's any other ways of making money on top of that. Now Fumi would continue this path, and eventually he would come across a terrifying creature within that cave. Within that cave, there's a creature that would be preposterous, a giant dog, a two-headed dog, as if this dog was going to basically destroy them. This dog would howl and try to attack Naofumi and Rautalia, and Naofumi would try to defend Rautalia, but she's terrified, scared, not knowing what to do. But as she finally builds up the courage to help, well, her Naofumi, or Master Naofumi, she finally is able to step forward. But just as she does, it seems as if a smaller chainsaw appears right in her arms, as if she is now connected to the weapon, just like Naofumi. Immediately, they're able to saw half of the monster off and defeat it. Just, well, barely. Naofumi is at death's door, and there's no extra defense that Naofumi actually had before, so she actually is forced to drag him off. And, well, when they arrive at Loot Village, he would be close to death's door. Luckily, in the village of Loot, he's able to get healed up by some magical powers. This is definitely eye-opening for Naofumi. How are there powers such like this that could take him, someone who was basically destroyed and almost, well, dead, and bring him practically back to life? Well, luckily he wasn't actually dead, because if he was, there would be no really bringing him back to life, I guess. But still, he's happy that he's alive, and he continues questing and actually building on Loot Village to hopefully protect it on the onslaught that is soon to come. And that onslaught will come very, very soon. Weeks would pass, and when they would, it would be finally time for the very first wave. Now Fumi would be extremely concerned, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but he's sitting around a level of 20, with Rautalia near a level of about 16 to 17. They haven't really been able to, quote-unquote, really train, but now Fumi has been, well, questing and helping people this entire time, and since that involves active experience points gains, luckily he's able to, well, level up as he wins. And he was so active throughout this time, so he was able to at least keep up to an extent. And also on top of that, he was working on building an area around Loot Village to make it more fortified. And this would have been, well, is shown to eventually be an amazing idea, because when the wave begins, it's such a surprise to all of them, because, well, Naofumi's not allowed in Melromark. He can't just waltz in and check when the wave starts. So when it does start, luckily, the immediate danger is halted. Naofumi, Rautalia, and many others that are currently in Loot Village who have been training and waiting for this moment, even some of the younger people currently there, are now fending off the monsters with relative ease. Luckily, there's nothing, or it seems like there's really nothing to be worried about. He begins sawing through monster after monster, and It's basically an onslaught for the good side of the people, for Naofumi being the hero, Raphtalia and many others that are currently at Loot Village. It seems like it's +1 for the good guys. But that +1 for the good guys isn't as simple as the storybooks. It's not as simple for some animes that Naofumi may have watched or games he may have played in the past. That there are outside effects. People that are supposedly good aren't always good. And he's seen that in the beginning of this world, and he's going to see it now. When magic arrows and magic spears begin to fall down and rain on Loot Village, explosions alike, Naofumi is forced to be put in a situation to protect the people around him. And when he does, he's extremely injured, and before anybody can even get to Naofumi, the injury turns to fatal. Well, let's just say the Knights of Melromarc have just killed one of the heroes. They might not deem Naofumi as one of the heroes, but one of them has just fallen. Raphtalia would be pissed, would be angry. She would charge in at the knights that would eventually arrive, but then, unfortunately, she would die too, laying there lifeless. Loot Village would step up and try to protect them, but nothing would happen, nothing would work. And the knights would eventually leave the town in ruins. And unfortunately, some of Loot Village would have passed on as well. Some of the younger people that were defending it, some that were training, but others did survive, hoping to get stronger, hoping to get better, being able to protect their village better the next time. But they're sad. Sad at the fact that the hero, the chainsaw hero, just died, and his companion did as well. They grab their bodies, each one of them, and begin to make some sort of ceremony to, well, commemorate them. But just as they're doing this, the knights and many others come in and take the bodies of both of them away, as if they don't want it to be known as that one of the heroes and their companion died in the midst of this battle. Nobody needs to know that Naofumi was even one of the heroes. He gets taken away, eventually being taken away to the Van Richnot territory. Now this is where they would stop. It seems as if one of them is a demi-human, and they decide to bury them, at least over in the Van Richnot territory, because of their love for demi-humans. But this would actually be a bad decision. A decision that would be a massive, massive mistake in the near future, because before their burial, before everything is put to rest, Naofumi begins to change, and so does Raphtalia. In death, obviously her slave mark would poof and disappear into nothingness, but it would be replaced by an odd looking ring. No, it looks like a weird string, like a motor, as if you pulled the string, it would start some sort of lawnmower. It's weird. Both Naofumi and Raphtalia have this sort of weird thing on their chest now, and in a matter of, seconds of realization, they reawaken, revived. They're no longer dead, and their levels have spiked drastically. But on top of that, it seems like there's potential for even more levels if they do a certain action. Their levels went from 20 or maybe even a high 15 to 17 to a massive 35 each. Somehow they gained strength, but it's because of one thing, that little tiny pet. They had no idea what it was, no clue, no connection, no nothing. What is it? What was it? It was somehow a connection with Naofumi and Raphtalia that allows them to be stronger, that revived them, brought them back, and now they're alive once again. Obviously, Van Richnot and many others that are currently there in their little territory are shocked and are kind of, in a way, scared. But Van Richnot calms them all down, telling them that it's okay, that these two right here were protecting an entire village on their own for a while, and they would have basically done it successfully. But unfortunately, they didn't have the defenses to stop the Knights of Melromark from raining hell from above to practically kill them all. Immediately, everyone there is shocked to hear this. Wow, they sabotaged their own heroes? In which Van Richnot explains that this hero is different. It seems as if he wasn't the shield hero like they were supposed to expect him to arrive as. The chainsaw is obviously a given, or a giveaway. And he explains to all of them that he is a hero. He might not be the shield's hero, but he is a hero at the end of the day. But he is the legendary chainsaw hero. Someone that could truly save them all. But Van Richnot comes over to them once again, telling them that they can't stay here. Everyone believes them to be dead, especially the castle and the kingdom of Melromark. If they stay here and they find out, there's going to be an issue with them being alive. They wanted them dead for a reason, so they need to get out of here and go to the nearest territory that's, well, right next to them. The closest country they can currently go to is known as Shield Frieden, and it would be best if they do so as well. Van Richnot begins to supply them with as much as he possibly can and tells them that they always have a place here if they need to come back. But he recommends staying there as long as possible, get stronger, because at the end of the day, it seems as if there's a pathway that they will need to go down that is nothing and nowhere near like the ones the past heroes did. Naofumi, Raphtalia, and whoever else is soon to come onto the party, if that means anyone else at all, well, they have a long, hard journey ahead of them, and it all starts with their transfer to Shield Frieden, a place that may greet them properly and may want them there. But at the end of the day, the problem is the waves, and the problem, well, before the waves, or in between that time period, will be the heroes. The heroes are an issue. Sword, spear, and bow. They don't care about the well-being of the fourth hero. They don't care about the legendary chainsaw hero. So now, him and Raphtalia will have to do it on their own. How will this occur? And what will happen after Naofumi and Raphtalia has finally revived? What happens with their brand new powers, and what can be even lurking in the shadows of what's beyond their powers that they currently have right now? Will they be strong enough to take on what's ahead? Well, you'll have to find out in the next part of What If Naofumi Was the Legendary Chainsaw Hero. Naofumi and Raphtalia were put in a, let's say, deadly situation, but now they're in a different situation. This situation is in a different country entirely, and this country wants to make sure that they are fine and ready to go. Naofumi and Raphtalia were revived under some sort of magical instance, but it's not necessarily magical. From what we know, it must have to do with that little companion. That tiny companion with a chainsaw blade sticking out of its head might have, well, morphed with Naofumi and Raphtalia. Is that the case? Well, they're not sure, but still, it's something that's Shield Frieden, the people and nobles there have no idea what's going on, but they still decide to help. The people of Shield Frieden begin to speak with Naofumi and Raphtalia about what occurred and what happened, and how did they die with such high levels. Keep in mind, with the fusion of whatever that little companion was, it actually leveled them up quite a bit. On top of that, giving them a higher threshold to gaining levels. It seems that they have powers even more dormant than they can possibly imagine, which is something Naofumi and Raphtalia need to figure out in the long run. But with that said, the nobles of Shield Frieden begin to speak with both of them, asking any questions they possibly can, and they answer anything they can. Basically saying that the reason why they died was because of, well, the kingdom of Melromark. They really didn't want them alive in the first place, and it all came crashing down and all came to a front relatively quickly after the first wave. They are obviously surprised to hear this, and frankly, they're shocked to hear this. They didn't think that Melromark would go to such lengths, especially when not getting what they wanted. But the noblemen of Schildfrieden question how, questionable is this really when coming from the Melromark kingdom. They've done some very questionable things, especially with summoning all the heroes at once. This is when Naofumi learns about how that shouldn't have happened. All of the heroes should have been summoned separately, but there must have been corruption within the Melromark kingdom that led to this. Of course, Schildfrieden says that they can stay as long as they want, and they would definitely appreciate their help in defending the waves. The other countries have no way really of defending the waves either, besides their armies. And yes, that is okay and doable now, but it won't be doable forever. They have armies, they have some of the 7-star heroes, but other than that, there's not much. And eventually they will get overpowered because the 4 summoned heroes are far stronger. The 4 cardinal heroes are going to be far stronger than anything else in this world. Of course, Naofumi is worried about this, but I mean, he has to think about the well-being of himself and his party member as well. They just literally died, and now they're somehow back to life. They're not so sure, but still, they decide they're going to help Schildfrieden, asking if they need any help around the country, in which, of course, they do. But they are a little bit, by a little bit, I mean a lot of bits, more set up than the Melromark kingdom. They're more structured and not more against each other, and frankly, there's not some sabotage going on, because currently in the Melromark country, there is a ton of sabotage and a ton of things going on that really are not going to be stopped. And obviously those include some of the instances that Naofumi originally would stop, but unfortunately now not in the position to do so. Naofumi can't do anything about it. But he can help with the people that he currently is around now. He begins to run errands with Rautalia around the Schildfrieden area, and frankly, a lot of it is beneficial. He helps the people in the country in general, kills some bosses that need to be killed, and he gains a pretty good amount of XP throughout this time. On top of that, he's introduced into various different ways of increasing strength. He didn't really have any armor or upgrades, and of course Schildfrieden is totally up to giving him whatever he needs to basically get stronger. On top of him helping out, they would have loved to give him free armor, free weaponry, but obviously he doesn't need any weapons, but anything that can really help him. So that's something Naofumi will definitely get upgraded at, and on top of that, as many potions and weaponry, or as many potions and enhancements that he needs, he basically gets all of it from Schildfrieden and the noblemen there. On top of that, the shops are more or less free for Naofumi as long as he helps out here and there, in which of course he does. He begins to level up rapidly, and he learns of the Dragon Hourglass, something that he didn't know about initially because of, his feud with Melromark, which is barely even a feud when Naofumi has no idea what he did wrong when he basically didn't do anything wrong. But he does learn that he can actually level up, or basically expand the level of his party members. This would lead to Rautalia getting even stronger, getting a class upgrade, and on top of that, he begins to add more people to his party. These people, I'll be honest, aren't as consequential, but they're just people in Schildfrieden that have some potential and have some potentially high strength thresholds that begin training with Naofumi. This alone would help the protection of Schildfrieden, so Naofumi would feel a lot better about being in certain areas when certain waves would begin. Nonetheless, he begins to travel Schildfrieden entirely and begins to look around. He even asks questions about the other countries, including Sildveld. Sildveld being the place that normally the shield hero is brought up in, but this time around, obviously, they know what happened, and there's straight up no shield hero at this moment. Of course, Naofumi is concerned. There's an underlying concern that he's definitely thinking about. Well, here's the problem. They all think he's dead. And if he's dead, from what he's heard and read in the books in the Shield Freedom library, it means that the heroes will get extremely harder waves. And if that's the case, will they even be able to win? I mean, Naofumi knows that he somehow did get revived, but does that still linger if he technically was dead at one point? Does he count as one of the heroes? He's not so sure. Frankly, there's no solid answer to any of this, but if the waves are more difficult because one hero technically died, that could mean the death of the world entirely, or at least the death of the heroes. Of course, Shield Freedom does respond to this, and they say that they're not so sure. They're really not. And if they knew more, they would definitely tell Naofumi, but unfortunately, they just don't. But, of course, Naofumi will continue to help out where he can, all the way up until the next wave. And that next wave is definitely something to look out for. But Naofumi and Rautalia have become so much stronger. On top of that, some of the other party members that are basically some noblemen or just high tier people that are warriors in Shield Freedom have become, well, immensely stronger as well. Naofumi and Rautalia have also tested out what their new powers are, but are still relatively confused about how to use them. Of course, the worry of a power that is unbeknownst to them is something important, especially when you never know. You could pull that cord, empty that bottle, and you might not be able to stop the power that unfolds. But of course, the noblemen of Shield Freedom have an idea. There is some sort of boss levels. There's something that they could do, really only the heroes can do, that is extremely difficult. At that point, it would be kind of suicide at their level. But if they believe that this strength that they have will be enough, or basically be enough to close that gap, it might be worth the try. In which they're not so sure if it's worth the risk, but I mean, they died once already, so I mean, there's really no reason not to risk it. And obviously, the people with Shield Freedom aren't so sure if that's the best course of action. But if this would open up a brand new way of power, maybe guaranteeing the safety of everyone else, well, maybe it's worth the risk. Of course, Rautalia and Naofumi nod in agreement. They decide that they might as well do this. They died once, they're not necessarily afraid to die again. And Naofumi believes that if there is a path to power and a path to strength that he can gain, maybe that can give him a chance to turn this world into a world that is normal for him. Because right now, it feels like he's just an enemy for a whole entire country, and he's never wanted to feel that way ever. He would rather be home right now, with his family, with reading his manga. He doesn't want any of this. He didn't want to be thrown into this hellscape of a place, in which Rautalia can agree, but she was born here. Rautalia has been through hell and back, so she understands the feeling, at least to a certain extent. So of course, they decide to go off to this so-called dungeon. And this dungeon, well, it's going to be a difficult one. A difficult one with an extremely, extremely strong boss. So they're going to have to be prepared for that. When they head off, they begin to see this so-called dungeon. It's a dungeon that seemingly is holding a monster from a previous wave that was before their time. This monster involves like giant roars, as they can literally hear it as they walk in. They begin cutting down the small fry monsters, nothing crazy, so the monsters that are weaker, of course, eventually leading to a giant door. This giant door is weird. It seems like it's been waiting here for them specifically. Naofumi looks at it more in depth to see this odd looking creature, a creature that has chainsaws, it seems, or blades at least, for arms and for a head. It seems like it's built of chainsaws or blades in itself. and it's a terrifying creature, in which Naofumi obviously doesn't know what to do, but as he puts his hand on the wall, it begins to crumble to dust. Welcome the legendary chainsaw hero. And of course, this ominous voice terrifies Naofumi, but the voice disappears just like how the door did once right in front of them, and a monster, a giant monster appears, a T-Rex like monster in fact, and that monster has a blade, a chainsaw on his head as well. Of course, the people of Shield Freedom have no idea what the monster even entails. Maybe it's different for each person that goes in, but if they wouldn't have known in the first place. But this would give them the opportunity, an opportunity to truly see what their powers have. And of course, what they didn't realize is that when they combined with that little pet, that tiny pet, they had no recollection and no idea what it was. When they pulled the string on their chest, they'd become monsters. The monster that was on the front of the door would be them. They would shred that T-Rex into little pieces, destroying it in a matter of seconds. But how and at what cost? They begin to go back to normal, looking at their body covered in blood, but they're fine. There's nothing else. They're not hurt, they're healed up, and there's no extra wounds. It seems as if there was no drawbacks either to their stats. Actually, it looks like there's been more positives than negatives. They've gained multiple levels, probably 5 to 10 levels maybe, because of killing that boss. But on top of that, they don't even know what type of strength they truly have when they're in that form. Maybe even 40, 50, 60 times or 60 levels higher than normal. That type of strength may be straight up unprecedented in general right now, but they're not so sure. They would climb out of this so-called dungeon, of course, and when they would get finally out, they'd realize that time has passed so much. They see that it's actually about to be the next wave already. So they decide to get ready as quick as possible, helping Shield Freedom get prepared as well. But they all stare at Raphtalia and also Naofumi as if they were brand new people. Strength it was embedded and surrounded them. They were so much stronger when they came in, and let's just say they were strong. Their strength skyrocketed when they died and came back. So it's kind of crazy to think that they're even stronger now. The legendary chainsaw hero and his partner, which arguably is kind of like basically a chainsaw hero in herself, is just exceeding all expectations in terms of power, exceeding everything. Maybe that has something to do with not having a connection to the other heroes. Maybe it has something to do with being a different type of hero than all the rest. Well, they're not sure, but they'll take the power where they can get it, and this next wave would then approach. The purple skies would then begin once again, and they would get ready for the wave. But as they wait, they see a giant dragon appear. A giant dragon with a purple-like belly would then swoop in and begin to breathe fire on Shield Freedom. Luckily, Raphtalia and also, Naofumi were able to prevent this relatively quickly, stopping the dragon from actually hurting everything nearby, and Shield Freedom even helped out with various other people and various other flying mounts that they needed to keep up with the flying dragon. Their strength alone in their regular forms was enough to keep up with said dragon, and as they amped up some of their special skills, they would begin to shred the dragon's wings, forcing the dragon basically to land on the ground. And once the dragon landed on the ground, it was over. The dragon was then killed, but as the dragon died, something else was still amiss. Someone else was still amiss. Out of nowhere, a giant explosion would then occur on top of the dragon. But that's because, well, someone else has arrived. The dragon explodes, and a person with a giant scythe, or at least a scythe in general, stands on top of the corpse of the dragon. And that man is known as the Scythe Hero. Hero or not, it doesn't seem very heroic to come down out of a wave. But it seems like there's an agenda that basically is going about, and this person by the name of, well, eventually we will know him as Lark, has his own agenda. Lark begins to fight Raphtalia and obviously Naofumi, believing that it could be an easy fight. But what he doesn't realize is he's outclassed by a mile, especially with only partial of his strength because of the wave ending relatively soon. But still, Lark is going to fall here. Lark doesn't stand a chance. Naofumi begins to use his base form initially, but would realize they would need to increase the strength. They pull the cord on their chest as chainsaws begin to emerge throughout their body, and let's just say this fight ended far quicker than you possibly would imagine. Lark would be wounded extremely bad, and frankly, he would need to escape to save his life, because Naofumi and Raphtalia would have no reason to keep them alive. And frankly, in this form that they're currently in, they're a lot more bloodthirsty. They're a lot more wanting to end their life. So there is no guarantee that Lark would even survive a little bit longer. So Lark is forced back through the wave, and he escapes at the skin of his teeth, not knowing what would lie ahead, hoping that Glass had more success than what, well, he did. And of course, she did. Glass did have far more success. Of course, the wave would eventually end, but the news of what occurred in Melromark would travel like wildfire. The news was simple, and that news was that one of the heroes in Melromark was slain. This sends shockwaves through everything and everyone. How the hell did they die? What happened? Were they that strong? Were the heroes that weak? Was the wave that powerful? They're not sure. But Naofumi tells Schildfrieden, or the nobleman of Schildfrieden, that he needs to head back to Melromark to see what occurred, and he needs information from the queen or whoever he possibly can as soon as possible. But when he crosses the border, he would quickly and very quickly get information from somebody he really hasn't seen at all. A shadow of the queen would speak to him, telling him that they need to speak to the queen ASAP, right now. If not, this could mean the end of the entire world. Not just the Melromark country, but the entire world. Because when one hero dies, the waves get stronger. And yes, Naofumi may have strength that is beyond everyone else's, but it doesn't mean that it will be a failsafe. Everything could collapse, and everything could die if they're not careful. And that is what she's afraid of. That's what the queen is terrified of now. Of course, Naofumi decides that he's going to speak and see the queen. He's going to see what she has to say with what's going on and what they went through. But that is for the next part of What If Naofumi was the legendary chainsaw hero. Naofumi, Iwatani, and Raphtalia begin to head back to the one place that they were summoned, or at least Naofumi was summoned, and the one place that they decided, or Melromark decided, to kill them. Melromark is where their destination lies, because they heard and been hearing rumors that one of the heroes either are gravely injured or have perished. But things would be even more negative than they can possibly imagine. And the reason for that, well, it's because when they arrive at Melromark, they not only see one person that is dead, being that of the spear hero, they see the bow and the sword hero practically dead. They're missing limbs, And on top of that, they're on death's door, standing or laying there lifeless entirely. Now this is an issue, and an issue for many reasons. And the main reason is that when the heroes die, the waves get extensively more difficult. Now Naofumi has gained strength beyond comprehension at this point. Yes, that is to be true. But how much stronger would these waves get now that there's one less hero? And well, there's a questionable, a big chance, frankly, that the other heroes may just perish as well. Now this is a giant issue. An issue that maybe Naofumi can't even overcome. But Naofumi asks where the spear hero currently is, and of course the Melromarc Kingdom is still reluctant to even let him in. They think that he's some sort of demonic creature, a demon of some sort, maybe some sort of monster. Maybe he's the reason for this. But he tells them that it's either, well, let him see where the spear hero fell and died, or, well, they will die with him. They take that as a literal threat and decide to preserve their own life. So they decide to take him to the location of where the spear hero body currently is. When they arrive, he begins to look at the body, and the body begins to glow this odd red color. Everyone is shocked and confused at what's going on, in which Naofumi is confused as well. But he's seen it before. When he personally died, he found power that he couldn't possibly comprehend. What if, just what if, these other heroes are linked to that power as well? What happens when they die? Does he get stronger as well? Well, in a way, this world works differently. Well, it works a lot differently. The Chainsaw Hero is built off of a couple things. The Chainsaw Hero is built off of sacrifice and death. Death and sacrifice. They go hand to hand within this hero, and it's made abundantly clear when Naofumi's power and strength not only spiked through his own death, but now is beginning to spike and gain in crazy amounts from the death of the spear hero. Now this may seem crazy and outlandish, but it seems as if they might have an out and a way to get out of the situation they currently are in. Supposedly, when one of the heroes dies, it is over. It is no reason for them to continue. But now, and what it seems like, is that the Chainsaw Hero gets extensively more powerful when these heroes die. So it actually is beneficial. Now this right here is a revelation that they were not thinking about and did not have in mind at all. Now, with that said, Naofumi takes in the power from the spear hero, not gaining necessarily the weapon, but the levels that he currently gained, and on top of that, abilities galore that sync up to himself. All the abilities that the spear hero has, he begins to basically absorb them within his chainsaw, and begins to have more and more tech trees that allow him to gain strength. His high levels before are unrecognizable at this point. He realizes this and begins to tell everybody and all the royalty at Melromarc that they're headed back to where the other heroes are. A bunch of the royal people begin to think that the reason for him to go back is to kill the other heroes and their lives, and he can find such power that is insane. The only way to stop this is, there's only one specific way to stop him, and that's through the church. What Naofumi doesn't know, that there's an aerial strike coming down on his location as they speak. The church believed that this was the best and, perfect timing to seize their attack and go in for the kill. A practical nuclear bomb lands on Naofumi and Raftalia, and frankly, anybody else that was currently there. But just as it happens, there's a weird, eerie feeling throughout the church. The church feels uneasy, as if the devil himself is staring back at their actions and is about to punish them for exactly what they did. This feeling quickly begins to make everyone pass out and go unconscious. Everyone but the Pope. This feeling would last for minutes. Minutes would turn into hours. Eventually, that feeling would make the Pope even take a knee when, well, the supposed legendary chainsaw hero finally arrives. But this and him, this feeling, he's no longer that hero. The chainsaw devil is here for vengeance. He ends the entire church's existence swiftly, and very quickly at that. The fact that he did all of this before even the arrival or the meeting with the queen, the idea that Naofumi decides where he goes first is something that he needed to handle. Eventually, the meeting with that queen would happen. Like I didn't reference before, the shadow would then leave, and it would be up to Naofumi in terms of where he wants to go and what he wants to do. He first needed to check on the heroes, and this was the best course of action. But then eventually the meeting with the queen would occur. He would speak with her about what's occurring and what's going on. But with one hero down already, she feels that hope might be lost. But that's not the case. The queen has been trying to get her shadows and many others to clean up the mess of that was happening in Melromark. Anything that was really occurring, which Naofumi is happy to hear. But just as he begins to conversate with the queen about these said actions, well, the other two heroes apparently have been killed as well. Well, eventually would pass away. The injuries were too much, and out of the four heroes, there's only one left. That being Naofumi, the legendary chainsaw hero. Eventually, the queen would arrive at the kingdom once again to see what occurred and what happened. The queen would strip the king of his royal duties, including her own daughter, stripping her of the royal status out of pure anger. They didn't actually set them up properly. Well, I mean, for one, they completely abandoned the chainsaw hero. Yes, he may not be the shield hero as they knew, but they abandoned him straight off the bat after betraying the treaty that was set in place in the very, very beginning. On top of that, they haven't done their own jobs. 3 heroes have died, and it's already seemingly over. But Naofumi makes it clear to the queen that he's going to do his best. He's going to cut through every last wave he can until he dies. And if he dies before saving the world entirely, then so be it. He walks over to the 2 dead corpses of the bow and the sword hero, absorbing their strength as well, and his power skyrockets immensely. Everyone around is shocked to see this, and Naofumi doesn't say a word. He tells them that the other people, royalty themselves, have given him this opportunity to be this strong, but for all the wrong reasons. The queen needs to stay here. Naofumi tells her this and says that there's a lot of work to be done, and he has a lot of work to be done elsewhere on top of that. She says that is completely fine. She understands. The big bulk of what's going on, at least with the church and everything else, seems to be tamed now, and not allowing these other people to even get out. Imprisoning, actually, mine and the king is one of the steps forward on top of that. Keeping them away and keeping them exactly where they need to be. With that being said and done, it seems like now it's just awaiting the next wave. The next wave is going to tell everybody and everything what's going to happen. Frankly, Naofumi might have power that they've never seen in a long time, having levels so far above anybody that anybody could possibly imagine. But does that mean that he'll be okay? Does that mean that everything will just fall into place how it needs to be? Well, they're not so sure. So luckily, there's a bit of extra training Naofumi will be able to get, and that is at the Calmira Archipelago events. When he arrives, though, he begins to get a sense of basically people watching him. And frankly, there are people watching him. Not only regular people, because they're curious about the solo hero that's left, supposedly needing to protect them, but on top of that, there are other heroes from a different world watching Naofumi. Naofumi would bring Raphtalia and a couple others that obviously he added to his party while he was at Shield Frieden. They're nowhere near as strong as Raphtalia and Naofumi, being that of their connection, and basically having their connection in the very beginning and their connection with the chainsaw, or being, well, the chainsaw demon in a way, or the chainsaw devil in a way. With that said, though, they begin to gain strength relatively rapidly. They gain pretty quick in terms of power, especially with levels and everything like that, gaining new weaponry, so on and so forth. Naofumi would even get armor upgrades and stuff like that, getting ready for the next wave to finally arrive. And when it would arrive, Naofumi would see that there's actually a wave that is going to happen at Calmira in a matter of days. And when that wave would approach, they would get all ready with ships and so on and so forth, and they would get ready to stop the wave. When the wave would begin, everything would be put on Naofumi to take down the strong boss that is ahead. And there is a lot of struggle in terms of the smaller creatures, but that is because of the weak adventurers. Naofumi isn't having trouble at all, especially when the boss arrives. He carves the fish boss up, a giant monster like fish, in a matter of seconds, as if it was really nothing to him. And then finally, something else that the wave's obviously not finished, and finally the other heroes from a different world would arrive. Glass, Lark, and Therese would eventually arrive and would eventually begin their siege. They would begin to fight Naofumi, and it would be obvious that this fight isn't even close. Naofumi would cut them down in a matter of seconds with no remorse. He feels that maybe if these people are heroes from another world, he might even gain strength from this, and he would be correct. The powers of 3 other cardinal heroes, Naofumi gains immense amount of power that begins to build more and more and more. Now this is something, Naofumi wasn't necessarily expecting. It was just a theory, but maybe he didn't gain as much experience and as much power because there was no ill will, you could say, toward these other heroes, which is completely fine. Naofumi gains a mass amount of strength, and it prepares him for the future that's ahead, especially as a solo hero. Before he actually kills them, though, he does learn more about the other world, that he needed to die for them to live, which is a whole concept that he would not understand. But there is something he would realize relatively quickly, and he would hear a majestic creature speak about it, asking if he would do anything in his power to make sure that this world stays safe. And on top of that, what would he do specifically to make sure that nothing happens to this world? Would he kill all others just to make sure that this world lives on? Make sure that the waves would eventually stop? What would he do? Naofumi is thinking about himself, about self-preservation, about the fact that, maybe he does need to kill everybody and destroy all the worlds to make sure that he and this world lives on. But does he really care about the people of this world? Not really. He doesn't care that much about everyone there in its totality. Yes, he might care about Raphtalia, about people from Shield Freedom, but he doesn't really know anything about anyone else. So that would mean he is protecting a world, but he's really protecting it out of self-preservation, the fact that he himself does not want to die. In which when the majestic voice hears this, the feeling of uneasiness would overwhelm not only her, but also Naofumi. Not knowing how to respond to this, Vittoria would reveal herself. The majestic voice is the Fallolial Queen, not knowing how to respond to what's going on. She's never seen a hero like this, if you could even call Naofumi a quote-unquote hero. What is Naofumi exactly? Now that is the question that is being asked. Is he a hero, or is he the Chainsaw Devil? Well, that is something that Naofumi cares very little to answer, and says that he'll do whatever needs to be done to make sure that him himself and also his party lives on and can see the rest of tomorrow. Of course, Vittoria doesn't really know what to say about this, but at the same time, she understands the predicament, understands the stance, and she knows now that there is no necessarily killing him at this moment. He actually is so strong that there is no guarantee that Vittoria herself, someone that is powerful beyond all means, can actually defeat Naofumi. So what it seems like is that there's only one choice and one thing to execute, and that is the death of all of the other heroes from every last world. Naofumi would eventually take on the role of exactly what Lark, Therese, and also Glass would do. He would hunt down worlds and obliterate them. Becoming one, or coming in and out of the wave, his power would fully be restored to him when the waves would open up, and he would wreak havoc on every single world he would fight. In terms of other conflicts in his own world, he was so strong to the point that they were nothing. The top of the top heroes that were beyond imaginable strength would follow Naofumi into the feat of battle. They may see him as the legendary Chainsaw hero, but the other worlds saw him as the legendary Chainsaw Devil. A devil that would come in and march them down, kill and wipe out the entirety of the heroes so that their world, his world, could survive. There was no repercussions too big. There was no reasoning too smart. The end of every last world was imminent. But that is a story for another day, and that is the end of What If Naofumi was the legendary Chainsaw hero, or maybe it should be changed to What If Naofumi was the legendary Chainsaw Devil. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, and make sure to leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all of you have an amazing day, and I hope all of y'all enjoyed this series. Have an amazing day, everyone. Later.